All right, and we are live. What is going on, my specialist SPC here, and welcome back to another episode of the Midwest Cantina podcast. That's right, you guys, 2 podcasts in 2 days. Heck, even just, 3 streams in a matter of 3 days. So definitely, definitely finally getting back into the swing of things a little bit here. So, sorry, trying to get the rest of my stuff all together here. But so, guys, yesterday's podcast I talked about the 5th anniversary of The Last Jedi. So, today's podcast is going to be more about Disney Star Wars as a whole. Now, this kind of to a degree is like a part 3 of a stream I did. Man, I talked about it a little bit yesterday, about 5 years ago, when I originally talked about just in general defending Disney Star Wars. And of course, I think it's been about a year or two ago, probably about 2 years ago now, I did a defending the sequel trilogy. But this one in general is just mostly about just Disney Star Wars in general. And the main reason I wanted to talk about this is because a few weeks ago I finally finished Andor. And obviously I'll talk a little bit about that here later on in the podcast, because we've got quite a bit of Disney Star Wars related stuff to talk about that's come out since they took over, literally almost over a decade ago now. So for me, I'm just going to willingly say it. I am somebody who has, obviously, there hasn't been a lot, for me personally, a lot of bad things that have happened with Disney Star Wars. There's been backstage decisions and stuff that have been made that I haven't been really a big fan of, in regards to, decisions that like Kathleen Kennedy has made. But besides all that, when I look at, the films and the shows, I'm somebody who's been a fan of it. I'm somebody who I have been behind everything Disney has done. I have enjoyed pretty much everything I have seen. There's not really anything I would personally say is, like god awful or atrocious or anything like that. I mean, I could do like a ranking here. I'm not sure how I would really do it, because I have everything written down that Disney has produced thus far since they have taken over. The only thing I didn't include on here was Rebels, because I'm not finished quite yet with Rebels. I'm only about halfway done with the show. I've been watching it for the better part of a year. But I mean, the first thing I want to talk about is, just to get it out of the way, are the sequel trilogy. I might not talk as much about The Last Jedi, since I talked about it again in yesterday's podcast. You guys can go back and you can get my thoughts on The Last Jedi in that video. But for me personally, I have loved the sequel trilogy. As a whole, I put it above the prequel trilogy as a whole, because I have problems with the first 2 films of the prequels when it comes to Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones more than the Phantom Menace. Just to me, I like the characters more. I like some of the action more. Obviously, of course, you can't compete with Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion, when it comes to the action and the entire span of Star Wars. But I have enjoyed the sequels quite a bit. I would still say, out of them all, The Force Awakens is still my favorite. I can still just remember being in the theater 7 years ago, watching this film, all the emotions I felt. And I will willingly say it's become one of my favorite films of all time. It's actually even replaced the Revenge of the Sith as my second favorite Star Wars film. Because every time I watch this film, every time I rewatch The Force Awakens, I get them exact same, moments and the exact same feelings I had the first time I watched it. First time I see the Millennium Falcon, I get all giddy and happy. When it comes to, seeing Luke at the end, when it comes to the death of Han Solo, getting to see Han and Leia interact again, there's just so many things for me that I love about The Force Awakens. Yes, is it filled with nostalgia? Absolutely. Is it basically a retreading of A New Hope to some degrees? Absolutely. But I continuously say it. The Force Awakens, yes, it might be filled with nostalgia. Yes, it's to a degree beat for beat of A New Hope. But it was honestly the best way for us to get re-entered back into this galaxy far, far away. And I do think that J.J. Abrams honestly knocked it out of the park with this. I still stand by my opinion that I still think this is the best thing Disney has put out since they claimed Lucasfilm back in 2012. As far as The Last Jedi, I'll just talk very briefly about it. Like I said, had a lot of mixed feelings when I left the theater the first time I watched it. Over time, I have grown to like the film a lot more. It's a lot more bold than The Force Awakens. Still, some things don't work for me entirely. Like the comedy doesn't entirely work. And the Rose Tico character, I was really still not a big fan of. But regardless, I do come to like The Last Jedi a lot more every time I watch the film. As far as The Rise of Skywalker, I'm still in the very minimal camp. I loved the film. I still do enjoy it when I watch the film. I can agree and I understand why people have their problems with it, because the problem with the sequel trilogy, it's multiple things. Kathleen Kennedy basically came out and told us all that, yeah, there wasn't a plan for the sequels. We didn't have a ongoing story to continue on. Also, obviously, too, every single film in the sequel trilogy seems like it's trying to retcon everything that came before. And obviously, Rise of Skywalker, they tried to do that, especially when it came to the things that they did in The Last Jedi that didn't entirely work for people. I understand why people don't like the sequels. I completely understand why. But I'm somebody, I like the sequels as a whole. It works very well for me. I'm somebody who can sit down, watch all three back to back to back, enjoy it for what it is, enjoy the characters, enjoy the moments that we get. Yes, I am a nostalgia whore. I do like the nostalgia because for me it pays tribute to what came before, and it works fine for me. So again, sequels, I enjoy them for what they are. I do understand why people don't like them. And obviously, backstage stuff when it comes to everything like that. Again, I can totally understand. The next thing I wanted to talk about here are now the standalone films. When it comes to the standalone films, Rogue One, obviously, hands down, is the best. I have continuously said this too. If you are somebody who is only a casual fan of Star Wars, you're looking to maybe get into the lore a little bit more, you're trying to ease your way into watching the original trilogy again and want to become more of a fan, you need to start with Rogue One. Because to me, Rogue One is a film a lot more, grounded. It is more of the definition of a war film than anything. And I think that's why a lot of my friends who aren't the diehard Star Wars fans, I got my buddy Andy, who I do the Talkalorian live with. This is his favorite Star Wars film. My buddy Travis, this is his favorite Star Wars film. And if I remember right, I think it's Ethan's, which I understand why the casual fans like this more. There's Not a lot to do with, like the Force, the Jedi. This is more just good guys, bad guys, good guys trying to get in, get these plans for the Death Star, and try to get them, and it leads into A New Hope. And I am somebody who, for a while, I will say, probably a good few years, I did say that Rogue One was a better film than The Force Awakens. And I would say, honestly, probably script wise and, you know, pacing wise and stuff, it probably is the better film. It's just, The Force Awakens just means a little bit more to me personally as an overall film because I didn't get a lot of the same emotions for Rogue One that I had for The Force Awakens. Same thing, too, with other films in the series. But if you do want to get into Star Wars, I would highly suggest you guys watch Rogue One because it works a little better just for casual fans. The next film, obviously, it's a film that gets so much hate, and I don't understand the hate for it, but that is Solo: A Star Wars Story. Now, Solo came out a good 5 months after The Last Jedi. Obviously, of course, the fan base, the people who hated The Last Jedi, they had the sour taste in their mouth of the direction that Rian Johnson decided to take the series. So I understood why a lot of people weren't really excited to go see Solo. Obviously, too, I've said it before and I'll say it again here. Solo is not a film that we needed. It's not really something that we desperately wanted here in the Star Wars franchise. But to me, it's just such a fun time to watch this film. I enjoy this film every single time I watch it. There's not a lot of negatives I have about it. I mean, the L3 droid's probably the bigger negative. Dryden Voss, I believe that's his name. It's been a while since I've watched the film, but the villain played by Paul Bettany, to me, he just didn't entirely work as a villain. He was kind of a little lackluster, in my opinion, as a villain. Obviously, too, though, getting to see Darth Maul at the end of the film was definitely, jaw-dropping for me because, for whatever reason, I was under the impression that it was the Emperor. But, Alden Ehrenreich, the guy who plays Han Solo, I thought did a phenomenal job. Donald Glover did an excellent job as Lando. I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that we're supposed to be getting this Lando series that's going to have Donald Glover in it. I don't know if that's been scrapped or if that's still continuing. I'm not really sure. There's been no news about it lately. But to me, it's a film that I think just gets so much hate, and I don't think it deserves the hate that it does. You can enjoy it for what it is. You just get a backstory of Han Solo. You get to see him do the infamous Kessel Run. You get to see how him and Chewbacca met, how he met Lando, how he wins the Millennium Falcon. So, I mean, you get some of the mystery behind Han Solo. You get to actually see and witness it on screen, which I'm also still going to say this, and I still wholeheartedly stand by this as well. I think if Solo would have been a Disney Plus series, whether it had been the first one, whether it came out after The Mandalorian, I do think Solo would have been more successful at being like a 8, maybe 9 to 10 episode little mini series on Disney Plus. As an overall film, it's like a good 3.5 out of 5 for me. And I think we could have, filled in a couple more gaps. We could have actually spent more time with Han and Kira before they got separated on Corellia. But overall, when it comes to the standalone films, I do think they are extremely well made. They're definitely script-wise, I think, are a little bit better when it comes to how they play out compared to some of the sequel films. But for me, they just kind of go down below the sequels just because I just have a lot more fun with the sequel trilogy as a whole. And I enjoy the characters more, the moments more. The next thing I want to talk about, there's a few I want to say for like a little bit later on, is Clone Wars Season 7. Now, I gotta be honest, I tried watching Clone Wars a number of years ago. I don't really remember how far I got. I don't know how far into the series it is, but I got to the Mon Calamaris, the alien race that is Admiral Akbar from Return of the Jedi. The guy, it's a trap, that guy. I got to that episode and I stopped watching it because to me I wasn't as invested. I know the things that happen. Obviously, season 4 we get the return of Darth Maul, the Night Sisters, Dathomir, all that stuff. And the show gets progressively better after that. That much I know. But I've got to be totally honest. I want to say I was like 3 seasons in. These first 3 seasons, as well as the Clone Wars movie, I watched that on a whim many years ago. Really wasn't a fan of that very much, but I'm very mixed on. There were like some pretty good episodes. I don't like how the episodes don't really flow together. They don't really, because I know there's an actual list of how to actually watch Clone Wars, so it goes basically in numerical order, I guess we could kind of say. Clone Wars Season 7, as of now, I would say is easily my favorite as of now. I haven't watched it all. The first 4 episodes, we were introduced to people who actually have a new series out on Disney Plus as well, with a new season coming out here in just a few weeks. We were introduced to the genetically engineered clones known as the Bad Batch, where we got Crosshair, we've got Hunter, we have got, I cannot remember his name. I know in the show, in Bad Batch, he's known as Goggles. I can't remember what his name is. Tech, that's his name. And we have Wrecker. So we have these group of clones who end up being recruited by Rex, who of course is Anakin's general, commander, whatever you want to call him, I guess, for the clone army. And they're going after Echo in these episodes. And I do think the clones are interesting enough. And I'm going to kind of save my thoughts on them when it actually comes to talking about the Bad Batch here in a little bit. But those first 4 episodes, they were okay. They were enjoyable enough to a degree. And then we get to the next handful of episodes. We catch back up with Ahsoka, kind of seeing what she's doing. She's down in the underworld of Coruscant. She's like a mechanic, basically. And that's when we end up meeting, I believe they're called the Cortez sisters. And those are easily the roughest episodes of this whole season, It's cool. We get to see them go to Kessel. Because, of course, obviously we saw Kessel in Solo. Very, very enjoyable part of the Solo. But I really didn't entirely enjoy these episodes. It was just cool to catch back up with Ahsoka, because I do know that she is accused of trying to kill somebody in the Jedi Temple. She gets framed, ends up leaving the Order after she's proven innocent, all that stuff. So it's cool to catch back up with her, see what she's been doing. But man, if I would have not watched the last 4 episodes, the Siege of Mandalore arc, I don't even know if I would have wanted to try to continue the Clone Wars TV series, because those final 4 episodes of the Clone Wars is probably easily some of the best stuff I've seen in Star Wars. And personally, I never thought I would say something like that when it came to watching a cartoon, especially. But just the way they handle it, the way the interactions between Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka is played out, it's just so well done. Because when it comes to Dave Filoni, obviously, he's been a big part of Clone Wars, Rebels, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. This guy knows how to write. This guy knows exactly, because he is basically the apprentice of George Lucas. So he understands Star Wars a lot better than, unfortunately, I don't like doing the toxicity stuff, but better than, like Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger, all them guys who just want the content to keep pumping out and stuff. Hence why the MCU is in the state that it is right now. But for me, those final 4 episodes of Clone Wars, I personally feel should have just been a one solid film. Whether you want to throw it in the theater, well, of course, obviously that was during the 2020 pandemic and all that, but you could have just released them first 8 episodes. I know it probably would have been rough for a lot of people. They probably wouldn't have even wanted to try to finish Clone Wars. But if you would have just put the Siege of Mandalore as a film, just called it, Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the Siege of Mandalore, it ties in so well with Revenge of the Sith. You actually get actual, like, audio clips from the show while Ahsoka and all of them are going through hyperspace. You, of course, obviously get, Order 66, an absolutely just, heartbreaking, tremendously drama-filled scene with Rex trying to fight back the inhibitor chip, all the other clones attacking Ahsoka. And, of course, obviously, Rex not wanting to kill or fight any of the clones. I mean, it's so well done, well crafted by Dave Filoni. Honestly, I'd give the entire arc a 5 out of 5. It easily is some of the best Star Wars stuff that has been out since Disney has taken over. And it's just sad it takes us, I don't even remember how many episodes it is. I want to say it's like 7 or 8 episodes to actually get us to that Siege of Mandalore arc. Because them episodes are rough to get through. But I feel like if they would have just released the Siege of Mandalore, because everybody has hailed this as being some of the best Clone Wars related content that we have gotten. And again, I haven't finished Clone Wars, so I don't really have an entire take or say if it's the best. But as of now, for me, it's the best stuff I've seen on the Clone Wars TV series. I'm going to save the live action stuff. I want to get the cartoon stuff out of the way. Just to let you guys know, if any of you want to ask about Resistance, I haven't seen the show. I'll be honest, I don't really have a lot of interest in watching the show either. I might give it a chance just to kind of see, because eventually I'm thinking about it. I'm not going to, guarantee it's going to happen, but I'm thinking about doing like a massive ranking of all the shows and the films all together, minusing out, like the Ewoks and the droids and the Christmas special and stuff, because those are things I haven't seen yet either. But since we're kind of already on the topic to a degree, let's talk about the Bad Batch. Now, I'm somebody, I was very late coming around to the Bad Batch. I know it came out last year, and I just didn't really have a lot of interest in it, because while I did find the clones in Season 7 of Clone Wars, the first handful of episodes, I found them interesting enough to just be additions to the Clone Wars TV series. I just didn't feel that they were important enough or well done enough for us to actually have them have their own standalone show, because I didn't really know how that was actually going to play out. And I can say for at least 5, maybe 6 episodes, I was proven wrong, especially the premiere episode. I would probably still say is my favorite, because I love how we actually get to see not only just from the perspective of these clones, but the perspective of other clones and the people around the galaxy right after Revenge of the Sith, right after the Siege of Mandalore, which reminds me, there's another show on here that I have yet to talk about yet, but 1 second here. Okay, there we go. Anyway, but getting to see the actual rise of the Empire, actually getting to see how the Empire actually started to make its way in, how we actually got to see the banning of the clones. You don't see many clones anymore. We're kind of slowly starting to get ourselves into the stormtroopers, or as they're known here, are the TK troopers because they go by their code names. And all them episodes that actually deal with, the insides of the Empire and stuff were easily the best episodes. You have a good handful of episodes in the middle. They're just basically little fetch quests. Bad Batch end up getting hired on by, I don't know what she really is, a crime lord, I guess I can kind of say. So they end up going and doing all these little just fetch quests and stuff, They were okay episodes, enjoyable enough. The fact of getting to see one of the Bad Batch actually join the Empire, get his inhibitor chip taken out, and still, following orders, still being a part of the Empire, I thought was very interesting enough. And I'll be honest, I was very skeptical on the character of Omega. I didn't know how I was going to feel about a female clone being in here. The way they handled the character at the beginning, I kind of thought she was a little annoying. She reminded me a lot of young Anakin from The Phantom Menace to some degrees. Also reminded me of Ahsoka in the early episodes of Clone Wars. Kind of even reminded me of Ezra a little bit in the beginning of Rebels. But I think the way they progressed her character throughout the show, I thought was very good, very interesting, especially when we learned more about her backstory. The fact that she was there the day that these 4 clones were originally created. The fact that they were able to recruit Echo after they save him from the Separatists. The way that they handled him, bringing him in, having him be almost like their droid, being able to hack into stuff. I thought he was very well done. Wrecker's just the comedic relief, the doughhead. He was enjoyable enough. Tech, I don't really like him. I don't like the way they handle his character, being the know-it-all, having to basically be the 3PO is the best way I can describe him of the show. And Hunter, I think, is a good enough leader, but I will be honest. I was more invested in Crosshair. He was the one I wanted to see a little bit more of because we didn't get a lot of him in this first season. I hope we get more of him in the second season that's coming up here in just a few weeks. But the middle section definitely hurts this show. It doesn't make it, this fantastic piece of Star Wars content. It's just an enjoyable, fun enough show. But when you actually get to the things that matter in the actual overall story of Star Wars, when it comes to, again, the clones and everything that happens on Kamino, the rising of the Empire, the way the Empire is actually handling themselves, being the new leaders of the galaxy, lying to everybody, telling them, oh, we're here for peace and all that stuff that you hear all the time from the Empire. And I still will stand by the fact that even though I enjoy the show enough, I still really don't think that these clones really should have had their own show. I mean, you could have had a nice little spin-off show for them, just like a measly couple episodes is all I would have done. But I'll end up seeing if I'm wrong here in a few weeks. I'm going to see how they handle the clones in the second season of the Bad Batch. Oh, and I guess to finish my thoughts on Omega, I didn't finish. The fact that they make her an unengineered clone just like Boba Fett and actually revealing to us that that's basically Boba Fett's sister, I think is interesting enough. It's more just later on. I want to see if, she's going to tie into maybe if there's a second season of the Book of Boba Fett, see if she comes around or see how her character is handled in this next season. I'm not really sure yet, but overall, The Bad Batch is a fun enough and enjoyable show to watch, but I still just stand by the fact that I just don't think these clones should have had their own TV series. The next thing I want to talk about is actually, since I'm still on the animated subject, and it was the one I just thought about, was Tales of the Jedi. Now, I just watched this a handful of weeks ago as well, and I definitely enjoyed this probably the most out of all the actual Dave Filoni animated shows as of now. Even it's on par with the Siege of Mandalore, but I have to include it all as a whole for season 7. I loved everything with Dooku. The way that they wrote Dooku's character was phenomenal, because I will willingly say, to a degree, I like Dooku, but he just kind of comes out of left field in Attack of the Clones. We never heard of him in The Phantom Menace, and then all of a sudden he just pops up, ends up being a former Jedi who joined Darth Sidious. So I liked we got more of an actual background of him. We got to actually see him along with a very young Qui-Gon Jinn in one of their missions, where you slowly see Dooku kind of be seduced a little bit to the dark side. And then you get to see Dooku right after Anakin is brought back to the temple for the first time, along with Qui-Gon. You actually get to see Qui-Gon interacting with a few people. And then you get the heartbreaking episode, which is followed up immediately after Qui-Gon's death in The Phantom Menace. You see him staring at the tree. Yaddle comes out. If you guys don't know who Yaddle is, it's the other Yo species who's in Attack of the Clones, or not Attack of the Clones, in The Phantom Menace for just a brief scene, so you guys might not even see her really. She comes up, ends up, trying to talk and discuss things with Dooku. And then we end up seeing him hop into a ship and go to where he actually goes at the end of Attack of the Clones, where he meets Darth Sidious. Yaddle follows him. She confronts him. They have a lightsaber duel. He ultimately ends up killing Yaddle, and finally is officially seduced to the dark side, becoming Count Dooku. I love the way they handle Dooku. It makes him a more interesting character. It adds to him more a little bit. Probably is going to make Attack of the Clones a little bit better for me. The Ahsoka stuff is more where I'm mixed, because the first episode was just okay. You basically just get a backstory of Ahsoka and what she did in her very early years of her life. And then you get to the next episode where she's actually a Padawan. Anakin is with her, and she's training with all the clones and stuff. And it's a great homage to her survival in Order 66, because she's doing the exact same moves and stuff she did when all the clones were trying to kill her on the Starship Bay. And then the third episode, another one that's okay. We got teased of this, honestly, just a badass looking version of an Inquisitor. And I love the design of this Inquisitor. But he is just beaten so easily by Ahsoka. And that's something that really bothered me about that episode. It started off pretty slow. We get to see at the beginning, Ahsoka is at Padme's funeral when in Revenge of the Sith, they're taking her down the streets of Naboo. Everybody's surrounding her. Ahsoka's there. She gets confronted by Bail Organa saying you shouldn't be here because they're still looking for more Jedi. And then she goes to this distant planet working as basically like a farmhand. An Inquisitor comes because one of the kids obviously notices that she's very force sensitive, notices she's a Jedi. Obviously, at this point in her story and the lore of Star Wars, she is not a Padawan anymore. She's not a Jedi anymore. And the fight is just very quick. It's honestly more on par with the Obi-Wan Darth Maul fight in Rebels. And it was just such a lackluster way to end the show. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I honestly would change it now. It's more of a 4 out of 5 for me, honestly. But I do think Tales of the Jedi has a lot of, more of a chance of being a more successful show if they do something like this. They could do Tales of the Sith, I know, is another one. They could do another season, Tales of the Jedi. You could include like Obi-Wan. Maybe you could even do Yoda. You could do the younger years of Anakin. I mean, this is a show that has a lot more potential, in my opinion, to be a longer lasting series than, say, like The Bad Batch. So definitely I thought that Tales of the Jedi is pretty decent. The next one I want to talk about, it was teased a number of years ago during, I don't remember what it's called. It's one of the Disney conventions. I can't think of what's investors meeting, I think it was. And that is Star Wars Visions. Now, to anybody who is listening, if you guys don't know what Visions is, obviously, if you guys aren't really into Star Wars, you probably haven't heard of it. But Visions was I believe, 9 episodes. It's somewhere between 7 and 9 episodes, but it is an anime. And this was the thing I was most intrigued about. This is another show. I finished it last week. I literally started it the same day, finished it, binged it all. Apparently, that's not the best way to watch the show because you're going to have a lot of different opinions. But I thought this show was very unique. I liked a vast majority of the episodes. Some of them were a little over the top. Some of them with the animation I really wasn't a fan of. The first episode, The Ronin, that one was just a straight up, what's the word? Wow, I'm blanking right now. Like an homage to the late Akira Kurosawa, because of course George Lucas grew up watching, Westerns and Akira Kurosawa films. That's how he came up with the idea of Star Wars. It's basically Western samurais with Dune mixed in. That's how you got Star Wars. A little bit of tidbit history for you guys who aren't really big Star Wars fans, but I liked The Ronin. I liked that episode. It was literally old school, literally felt like Seven Samurai. I liked the Elder episode. That one was good. My favorite was probably the one called The Ninth Jedi. I liked the animation the best. I liked the action the best. I liked the story easily the best. This is just a show, I would say, if you want to... Again, I would say this is more for casual fans, because this is more like fan fiction-y Star Wars. And I know there's quite a few people who, if you like anime, I would just give it a shot too. And it's definitely enjoyable enough just to sit down, just consume some Star Wars content that you don't have to actually get overly invested in, where you need to watch multiple different things. My biggest complaint about the show, though, is I wish they would have just taken one of those specific stories and made it actually like a whole season, so you could actually flesh the characters out, do more of a better story, instead of just doing it between a 15 to 20 minute episode. But I'd say Visions is pretty decent enough to watch. If even, again, like I said, if you're an anime fan, I would suggest to watch it, because each episode has like its own animation style. So the action is pretty good in all of them. A lot of the characters are actually pretty well done as well, along with some of the stories. Again, my favorite, like I said, is The Ninth Jedi. That was my favorite episode. The Ronin was a good episode. The Elder was another great episode. And I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it had this family who ends up meeting this. She's like a rabbit human hybrid. That episode was pretty well done. I think it was Toff or Hop or something. I can't remember what the name is, but definitely would suggest Star Wars Visions if you guys are casual fans of Star Wars. Now we're done with talking about the sequel trilogy. We're done talking about the standalone films. We are done talking about the animated shows. So it's now time to get into talking about the live action Disney Star Wars shows. This to me is the area that I personally think is probably the better future for Star Wars. Granted, I know we were teased quite a bit of movies still. We're been teased with Rogue Squadron, so we have that coming out eventually as well. But I do think that doing it like this in a TV series is a little bit more of a smarter idea to continue Star Wars. That's just my opinion, though. And I mean, obviously, where can you start off by talking about the live action Disney Star Wars shows? Then, of course, starting with what I still think is the best show out of them all. That's The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, at least the first season, was such a great self-contained story. I will still say to this day, the very first episode of The Mandalorian is easily some of my favorite stuff in Star Wars. Because it just shows, where the character is. It shows us where, it takes place in the universe. This takes place 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. So you're starting to see the downfall of the Empire. And it shows you the dark tone that the show is taking. This isn't going to be, a lighthearted show. This ain't going to be super lighthearted like if you'd watch like Return of the Jedi, where, you have the Ewoks and stuff like that. Like, this is a very serious show. And I love the character of Din Djarin, the name of the Mandalorian. I love the adventures he goes on. I love the look of him. To me, this easily is a better overall character than Boba Fett, especially when we get into talking about his show. To me, just the way that Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni have handled this character, have handled this story in this realm of Star Wars. It is just, to me, again, some of the best Star Wars content we have gotten. And I thoroughly enjoy it the most. Love the introduction of the new characters, obviously, minus all the backstage, all the drama with Gina Carano. I love the character of Cara Dune. I thought she was a great addition to the show. So it's sad we're not going to get her in Mando Season 3. Obviously, we're not getting her show of the Rangers of the New Republic. We're not going to be getting that show anymore, unfortunately. I liked Grief Karga enough to a degree in the first season. Second season, he just kind of seemed to me like a glorified cameo. I like the villain quite a bit, played by Giancarlo Esposito. Moff Gideon, easily one of the better Empire villains up there with the likes of, Grand Moff Tarkin. You could even say Thrawn. Of course, I haven't gotten to the Thrawn stuff yet, so I'm not really sure yet about him. And obviously, of course, you can't talk about The Mandalorian without talking about Baby Yoda, Grogu. I mean, easily the cutest addition, the best addition to the Star Wars lore. Yes, obviously, he's just a merchandise seller, but the way they handle his character alongside of Din Djarin is fantastic. And especially, too, when you get to the final episode of Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Also, again, one of the best pieces of Star Wars content for a lot of people, getting to finally see their true version of Luke Skywalker. Especially after, for a lot of them, the disappointment with The Last Jedi, the way they handled Luke. To me, yes, I was one of the many people who sat down, watched the show, bawled my eyes out. I was so incredibly happy. It's my favorite episode of The Mandalorian now, next to the premiere of the series. And I'm extremely excited to see where they're going to go with the new season because, obviously, again, I'll talk about it next. But bringing in Mando to the Book of Boba Fett and getting them to reunite, I felt like it was kind of a cheap move because I would have rather seen it in the beginning of Mando season 2, personally. But this is the biggest piece of Star Wars content I'm the most excited to see. I'm hoping it doesn't go past like 5 seasons. I don't want this to be a show that gets drug out too long. I wouldn't mind seeing Din Djarin pop up in other pieces of Star Wars content, but I hope they just continue to handle this show the best, and I hope they take their time, write the story good enough, include more new characters, have Din Djarin and Grogu be this great team, because they just remind me a lot of Piccolo and Gohan, just the way that they interact with one another, the way that Din is so protective of Grogu, and the way Grogu also protects Din. So yeah, The Mandalorian easily is the most exciting stuff coming out for Star Wars. And I just brought it up, obviously, of course, now we will talk about the Book of Boba Fett. Now, for a lot of people, this is the most disappointing show, along with the next show I'm going to be bringing up as well. But I will say, overall, I think it's a solid enough show/season. I don't know if we're going to be getting another season of the show. I guess that's, something we will see a little bit later on, I guess. But it's honestly just more the way they handled Boba Fett in the show. To me, was the most disappointing part, because to me, the best part of watching this show was all the stuff he was doing with the Tuskens, seeing him, coming out of the Sarlacc pit after escaping, having his armor taken away by Jawas. But I loved getting to see a more human version of Boba Fett, seeing how he was coming back slowly into society, what leads up to what happens in Mandalorian season 2 when we see him, which I do think personally that season 2 of Mandalorian easily handled Boba Fett, made him a lot more badass in that than he is in here. Because I've continued to say it, I still stand by the statement, even though I've come around to the character a little more. I do still think Boba Fett is easily the most overrated Star Wars character in the history of this series, especially the way he's handled in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I don't think he's personally worthy of being this, higher up character within people's fan bases. But if you guys like Boba Fett, I respect your decision as to why. My favorite version of the character is from season 2 of Mandalorian. But in the Book of Boba Fett, the show that is literally labeled Boba Fett, this is so far removed from how Boba is. He is so much more of like a jokester. He's a lot more happy. He doesn't seem as intimidating as he was in Mandalorian season 2. Because they teased us that this show was going to be more kind of like a Godfather version of Star Wars. How we were going to actually see how Boba Fett would run his quote unquote, we'll just say empire, the underworld of Star Wars, which is something I'm more fascinated in wanting to see. An old video I did many years ago, I wanted to see more of like a bounty hunters film, but I'd like to see more bounty hunter shows, which is why I love The Mandalorian so much, because it's something I've been more invested in with bounty hunters and stuff. But Boba Fett seems like he's more a second fiddle in his own show, because we literally have 2 full 50 to 60-minute episodes of The Mandalorian in this show. Episode 5 is literally labeled The Return of the Mandalorian. You don't see Boba Fett at all. It still shows at the beginning, you're at the end credits, it still shows starring Tamora Morrison. He's not even in the episode. You get to the next episode, and it's more of a Luke and Grogu episode. And then Boba Fett just kind of pops up at the end on Tatooine. So for me, the fact that the show's called The Book of Boba Fett, and he's literally almost like a secondary character to a degree in the back half, it's disappointing. I will say this is probably the more disappointing of the 4 live-action Star Wars series for me. I did still enjoy it enough. I liked seeing Cad Bane in live action. That was cool. I liked getting able to see, Boba Fett riding a Rancor in the streets of Mos Eisley. That was cool. I liked seeing him team up with Din, seeing them, take on the Pikes. That was cool as well. But it's just some of the mid stuff it didn't work for me. Like Tatooine has always been labeled as like this just barren wasteland. So everybody seems more worn down. People seem, everything is rusted up and just not working right. And then you have this group of bikers, and they're just driving these colorful, completely restored vehicles around the streets of Mos Eisley. So that didn't really work for me. I'm excited, though, to see where they're going to go with Cobb Vanth, because I'm assuming probably next season he's going to come back for at least, I want to say, hopefully Mando Season 3. And I'm really hoping they actually didn't legitimately kill Cad Bane in this show, because getting to see him in live action, obviously, of course, knowing his legacy in the Clone Wars TV series, I do think the show should bring him back regardless. Have him just be like captured, actually not killed. He was just stabbed, and then he was brought into a medical bay, put into a bacta tank, healed back up. So fingers crossed we're going to be getting Cad Bane back if we get another season of Book of Boba Fett. And if we do, even Tamora Morrison has come out and said it, they need to bring Boba Fett back to his old badass ways, because this definitely was not the Boba Fett from Mando Season 2. So I will say, still solid show, but easily the weakest of the live-action Disney Star Wars shows we have received. Next up, this is the one that honestly surprises me the most with the amount of disappointment and even the amount of hate this show has received over the last number of months since it's revealed. And that is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, I did do a podcast number of months ago talking about the first 3 episodes. So I guess you could say this portion is the second half of that, talking about 4, 5, and 6. I did like the first 3 episodes. I liked the first episode quite a bit because, we get to actually see the damage in Obi-Wan's mind from what happened in Revenge of the Sith. The fall of the Jedi, the turning of Anakin Skywalker, everything that happened on Mustafar, the death of Padme, separating the twins. Just seeing how all of that affects Obi-Wan. And it might be tied with my favorite episode of the series. Obviously, we get the little stuff in between with Leia. I know a lot of people criticize the little chase scene. I definitely can agree with that. My biggest complaint, though, about the show, before I get into the next handful of episodes, again, because I haven't talked about them yet, but the character of Reva, to me, it's like they tried to make her like the second sister from Jedi Fallen Order Trilla, who, by the way, easily one of the, if not, in my opinion, the best Inquisitor of all of them. Because I was the most invested in her character arc, most invested in where she started, where she's ending. But Riva just it's nothing against Moses Ingram, because I know that's a huge topic when it comes to talking about this show in particular with all the hate she's received. To me, I didn't like the way they wrote her character. To me, her character just does not work as well as Trilla did. I was more invested in the other Inquisitors who were there in the show because I felt like they were just more interesting, since we kind of know one of them, especially from Rebels. But man, I gotta say, the two biggest positives of the show for me, easily, hands down, Ewan McGregor returning as Obi-Wan. It's like the guy never even left the role. It's literally like this show just came out literally like a year after Revenge of the Sith came out. And he just stepped right back into that role like it was nothing. And we did get to see, at least in the back half, and especially the last episode, him slowly actually turning into the Alec Guinness version of Obi-Wan. And man, just Darth Vader. I'm gonna say this, and this is my opinion. You guys want to disagree? That's totally fine. This is the biggest positive I have given to Disney, is them handling Darth Vader. Because when we see Vader, we get the episode where him and Obi-Wan are on that planet. Vader's just walking through the streets and he's just snapping people's necks. Like, that is the evil Darth Vader. That is the single best cinematic villain ever put to screen. Right there. Just the way he tortures Obi-Wan throughout that episode too, just slowly chasing him, fighting him with the lightsaber, literally igniting the ground and dragging Obi-Wan through literal fire. Shades of what happened, obviously, of course, in, Revenge of the Sith with Anakin burning up. And just the way they continue his character throughout the show, seeing how powerful, how angry Darth Vader is, knowing that Obi-Wan is here, he's still alive. When you get to episodes 4, 5, and 6, it's the best Vader. You get some of the best shots of Vader. I think it's the 5th episode. I haven't rewatched the show since it came out originally, so I haven't seen it in quite a while. But I believe it's the 5th episode. They're trying to take off in this ship, and Vader just literally star killers the ship. He just grabs it with the Force and just brings it back down. The other ship ends up turning off, going off. And honestly, too, I brought it up, Riva, like, her character just progressively got worse, in my opinion, the farther the show went along. She was decent enough in the first episode to be at least a decent villain, a decent character, but every episode, every minute she was on screen, I got less interested in her overall. A lot of the side characters, I don't remember literally any of them. I did love the episode, I believe it's episode 4, where we actually get to go to Fortress Inquisitorius. I believe it's a moon that's by Mustafar. I think, I'm not entirely sure yet with this portion of Star Wars, but the planet that we go to in Jedi Fallen Order with Cal, where he is heading in, he's trying to find the holocron. That's where, of course, he runs into Trilla, ultimately ends up beating her. She gets killed by Darth Vader. Vader chases us throughout this place. I loved being able to actually go to this place, seeing this in live action. Just like, if you guys are a fan of the Vader comics, getting to actually see Darth Vader's castle and actually getting to see it in live action, not only just in Obi-Wan Kenobi, but also in Rogue One. And even to Rogue One, I didn't say it, but man, Vader and that, just chef's kiss. Easily, again, some of the best Vader stuff we have gotten in all of Star Wars. Obviously, of course, original trilogy, easily still the best Vader, but I felt that Disney did a great job leading us into that amazing Darth Vader from the original trilogy. I honestly love the fight on the other planet at the very last episode. It's a nice homage to. It's kind of weird though for me to word it like this, but it's kind of a good homage to Rebels, but also a good little teaser for Return of the Jedi, which I'll say has this episode, even I guess just the show to some degrees, makes Return of the Jedi go up a little bit more in my ranking. Makes me like the film a little more. Sorry, I've been talking for a while, so I'm kind of starting to feel the brain fatigue. But in Rebels, Ahsoka cuts off the right side of Vader's helmet, getting to reveal Anakin's eyes, Anakin's face. In this episode of Obi-Wan, we get the other side cut off. So it's nice little homages that the two people who were the closest to Anakin growing up, his old Padawan Ahsoka, his old master, friend, brother, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Each of them were able to reveal the eyes of Anakin, but they weren't able to fully remove the mask of Darth Vader from Anakin Skywalker. Where Luke was able to do that in Return of the Jedi. Luke, these are both great homages, great just teases of what's coming later on in the future for this character of Darth Vader. And I mean, the line delivery too from that scene between Ewan and Hayden is just, I loved it. It's again also up there too with some of my favorite stuff from Star Wars. With Obi-Wan seeing the look on Anakin's face, kind of a little bit in the blue hue of his lightsaber, and he's like, "I'm sorry, Anakin," and then Vader saying stuff like, "I'm not your failure, Obi-Wan. You did not kill Anakin Skywalker." And then you just slowly see the red hue of Vader's lightsaber come up to where Anakin's face is, and you get to see the Sith eye return, and him saying, "I did." I loved this show. Yes, was it paced a little weird? Yes. Were there some forgettable characters, forgettable stuff? Yes. But I loved getting to see the stuff between Obi-Wan and Vader. I liked most of the stuff between Obi-Wan and Leia, but if you watch this show and then you make your way to A New Hope, it kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it almost seems like she completely forgets Obi-Wan. But this easily has been my second favorite show of Disney Plus. I love the way that they did this, especially the ending, with Owen finally kind of letting loose, because in the beginning of the series, he wanted Obi-Wan to just stay away because he knows what happened with the Jedi. He knows what happened with Anakin. But then in the final episode, finally loosening up, saying like, "Hey, do you want to meet Luke? Do you want to talk to Luke?" Getting to see that, we get to see the starship that Luke is actually playing with in A New Hope at the beginning while he's bathing 3PO and working on R2. And obviously, of course, too, the ending with him walking the desert, being able to see the Force ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson finally returning to live action Star Wars. Of course, providing the voice of Qui-Gon in things like the Clone Wars animated series from 2003, along with episodes of the Clone Wars from 2008. But getting to actually see Liam Neeson dressed up as Qui-Gon once again for the first time since, I was about to say Attack of the Clones. Wow. Phantom Menace. it was great to see. I would love to see more of Liam Neeson back in Star Wars. If they do another season 2, I would love to see the interaction between him and Obi-Wan, of him slowly training him into eventually becoming one with the Force, which leads up to the ultimate battle between him and Vader on the Death Star. I just think that would be incredible to see. So this is like a solid 4 out of 5 for me when it comes to the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I can understand. I know some people say the show looks cheap. There's lots of plot holes. All the stuff with Reva. I understand the criticisms for the show, but for me, it works because Obi-Wan Kenobi is one of my top 5 favorite Star Wars characters. I love Ewan McGregor. He's one of my favorite actors of all time. So getting to see him come back into the role, who I personally think is the best and is my version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I will still say it again, no disrespect to the late Alec Guinness, but I just think Ewan embodies what Obi-Wan Kenobi really is. And now we are here at the final show. The one is the show that's the reason I wanted to do this podcast. Especially everything I have been hearing about it. But this is just, again, my opinion. Also, if you haven't watched the show, this is going to be spoiler filled. So whether you guys, if you're casual Star Wars fans and you don't care, just keep on listening. If you guys haven't watched Andor and you don't want to be, spoiled, obviously turn this off, come back later. But as I just said, the show Andor. For a lot of people, this is the best Disney Star Wars show for them in terms of, budget, script writing, acting, all that stuff. I get the hype. I get why this is, for a lot of people, their favorite Star Wars show. And I respect your guys' opinion if you do like it. To me personally, this is probably it's tied for my least favorite. I'm going to be totally brutally honest here because this is kind of a similar situation with the character of Cassian Andor that I have with the Bad Batch. That's one of the biggest criticisms I have for Rogue One, as much as I love the film. The characters in the film are just so forgettable, is the problem. And for me, Cassian Andor is my least favorite character in all of Rogue One. I don't like the decisions he makes. The acting from Diego Luna is good. I think he performs the character good enough. But it's just the morals of the character, the decisions he makes, the way he goes about doing things. I'm not a fan. So when I heard there was going to be a Cassian Andor show, I shook my head and said, why? Why is there going to be a show about Cassian Andor? Sat down, I finally binged the show. It took me multiple watches because I watched the first 2 episodes. I stopped before the third one. I didn't watch the show for a handful of weeks. I decided to rewatch the first 2 episodes again. Ended up happening again. So I watched the first 2 episodes 3 times. And I finally just decided, you know what, fine. I'm just going to finally get this done. I'm going to binge the show, get it all done in one shot. And I would say, yes, cinematically, visual-wise, even if you want to go acting-wise, I would even still agree, yes, this is probably the best Disney Plus Star Wars show that's come out. But for me personally, I was very bored watching some of these episodes. The thing I enjoyed the most about this show was all the stuff with the Empire. I'm somebody where the Empire is my favorite faction in Star Wars when it comes to military-wise. So that's the portion of the show I enjoyed the most. I was the most intrigued with. When it came to the security team, I didn't care personally. The Mon Mothma stuff, I thought some of it was intriguing enough, interesting enough, but easily to me was the weakest part and the most forgettable part of the show because I felt like it just seemed out of left field bringing her in, and it didn't seem like it fit within the story of Andor. Probably also my second favorite stuff is when Cassian goes to this planet with this little group of rebels. They end up going stealing, I think it's fuel or credits or something. Those handful of episodes were great. To me, the best actor in the entire show easily was Andy Serkis in the last half of the show where Cassian is stuck in the prison planet. And especially to the after credits scene, actually seeing what they were doing, what they were actually building when it came to that. So the fact that Cassian is involved with the very thing that kills him in Rogue One, the Death Star, helping them build the dish of the Death Star, I thought was a nice little ending to this show. But from the sounds of it, we're getting a second season because it's going to tie into Rogue One. But also, again, for me, acting from Diego Luna in this was great. But again, I do not like the character of Cassian Andor. I did not like, again, the decisions he made, the things he was doing in here. I wasn't a fan. I can understand script writing wise why this is the best Star Wars show, but for me personally, I would honestly probably say, even battling between the Book of Boba Fett, I can enjoy the Book of Boba Fett more than I can Andor. Maybe if I rewatch it again, and then maybe if I watch Rogue One, maybe I'll have a different perspective of the show. But to me, it's personally the weakest, and I was more bored watching some episodes of Andor than I was even watching some episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. Like right now, if I had to rank all these shows, Mandalorian number one, Obi-Wan number two, I'll still be honest. Right now, it's back and forth because they both have problems between Book of Boba Fett and Andor. Maybe season two will change my mind if we actually get the season two, but this to me, out of everything Disney Star Wars, is the thing I was the least interested in, especially when we had it was the investors meeting. That's what it was. We started getting all the stuff for Visions, Lando. We had the next season of Mandalorian for that year, which would have been season two. We had The Acolyte, Rangers of the New Republic. I was more excited for all that stuff when it comes to Disney, except for Andor. Andor was the thing I did not care about. But I do like how in the last episode, they don't really tell you the show is actually about Cassian Andor, because there's his mother. I can't remember what her name is, but she plays a huge role in the final episode. So I like how they just kind of just call it Andor, because it could be about her. It could also be about Cassian. It could just be the Andor family in general, which for them is basically the spark of the rebellion being born. But I'll still say I won't be excited really for a season two of Andor. I will still watch it, but it's something I'm just not overly looking forward to. Now, the final thing I want to talk about. I'm done with all the content that Disney has released. I'm not going to talk about video games or books because I haven't really read much of the books. Game wise, we only have the two Battlefront games and Jedi Fallen Order. Jedi Fallen Order is great. If you guys want to know my opinion about it, I streamed the entire game. But I am excited for the future of Star Wars. And I know for a lot of people, Disney has not handled Star Wars very well. And I can understand why people don't like it very much. I get it. And film wise, I know as of now, the only film I know for sure we're supposed to be getting, because they did reconfirm it again. Actually, Patty Jenkins did herself. We are still getting the Rogue Squadron movie, but from the sounds of it, we are not getting that until 2025. So we still have at least 3 more years of no Star Wars films, not being able to sit there in the theater watching them on the big screen. But I do feel the shows are a better way to enjoy Star Wars some more, because you can flesh out specific characters. Once again, Mandalorian Season 3 right now is my most anticipated thing coming out. I can willingly say I will watch The Bad Batch Season 2. Not overly excited, but I'm more intrigued to watch it to see how things are going to continue with these clones and where their story is going to go. I know we were also teased. We've been getting a lot of leaks for it lately, but the Acolyte, showing how the Sith actually, infiltrated the Jedi Temple, the Jedi Order. And it's set, I believe, 100 years before Episode 1. It takes place in the High Republic era. I don't know anything about the High Republic at all, really. So I'm very excited to see that actually getting a Sith-oriented show. Again, not sure if we're getting, a Season 2 of Book of Boba Fett yet, so I can't really comment on that. Also, the Lando show, don't know if we're getting that either. If we're getting that, I would be pretty excited to see that, because I did like Donald Glover's performance as Lando Calrissian. And the other, I think there's one more show. I don't know why I'm blanking right now. I am blanking right now. Oh, we're also getting Skeleton Crew. That one I don't know if that's going to be a show. Ahsoka. That's what it is. Sorry. The Ahsoka show as well. We've been getting a lot more leaks about that show as well, of where they're going to be going with that one. Sounds like a lot of it might take place with the World Between Worlds. We might be going through like a time travel show. We might be getting her actually taking the place of Obi-Wan on Mustafar and taking on Anakin, because it's been confirmed Hayden Christensen is going to be reprising his role as Anakin Skywalker in this show. So for that, and apparently he is in his Clone Wars uniform, so we are going to be seeing that as well. And the fact, too, that I know all these shows involving Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, all these shows are apparently supposed to eventually end in this big climactic ending, this big climactic battle. So I'm excited to see, where possibly Mandalorian, if we get another season, Book of Boba Fett, the Ahsoka show. I'm not sure if Skeleton Crew is involved in there, but supposedly that show is supposed to be more oriented around like the Night Sisters and stuff, I guess. Not sure yet, but we'll find out on that. So for me personally, the future of Star Wars is looking bright. I do still think doing shows on this streaming platform is a more better way to go with the franchise. Obviously, though, I do want to go back to the theater. I do still want to see a Star Wars film, especially if we get Rogue Squadron. I want to see Rogue Squadron on the big screen. I know, too, it's still very much clouded right now, but the eventual Rian Johnson trilogy of films, I don't know where that's going to be going, if supposedly that's taking place after Rise of Skywalker. So while the future is clouded in mystery, not to sound all, Jedi-ish, but while it's clouded in mystery, I do personally think the future of Star Wars is looking bright. I do think it's going to go in a different direction. And I do hope we get more unique characters like Din Djarin. I do hope, we get to ultimately see where all these shows end up, because supposedly we're supposed to be leading towards the return of Ezra, the return of Thrawn. That's why I need to hurry up and get caught up on Rebels so I can see how Thrawn actually is. So I'm excited for the future of Star Wars. And again, I will say it again. I personally think Disney has handled Star Wars very well. I've enjoyed everything. Everything I've given more positive than negative. Some things I mixed on, especially when it regards to Book of Boba Fett, Andor. But guys, I think that is going to do it for this episode of the Midwest Cantina podcast. Make sure you guys head down below in the comments section. Let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions on Disney Star Wars. Has Disney handled it good? Has it been bad? Has it been mixed? Make sure you guys let me know down below in the comments. Also, if you guys want to, you guys can rank everything Disney has done down in the comments too. Rank them all. Let me know your guys' thoughts on those. Also, if you guys are new here, please consider clicking that subscribe button, turning on the notification bell so you guys don't miss out on any future videos or live streams. And obviously, of course, consider giving the video a thumbs up. So, with that being said, you guys, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.